Okay, so the sutta that we are going. Okay, so the sutta we're going to be discussing is commonly known as the Fire Sermon. Uh, I believe it is the third sermon or the third discourse, the third teaching that the Buddha gave. Um, this is the third month that we've done a sutta. Um, the first, and we did have been going a little bit in order from the first sutta that the Buddha gave to the second. First sutta was oh wow, I just blanked out. Dhamma Chakkaparvatana Sutta, which is the turning the wheel of Dhamma in motion, where he talks about the Four Noble Truths. The second sutta, he talks about not self, which is always confusing to many people. And this sutta, he's going to be talking about our friend slash not so much friend, craving. So let's get right into it. And there on Gaia head, that's just the location where the Buddha was speaking. The Sublime One lived together with 1,000 bhikkhus. And there the Sublime One addressed the bhikkhus. All things are bhikkhus are on fire. And what bhikkhus are all these things which are on fire? The I, bhikkhus, is on fire. Forms are on fire. I consciousness is on fire. Eye contact is on fire. So let me just do a little clarification of what these terms are. We all know what the eye is. The eye is that physical organ that's attached to our brain and pokes out our skull that allows us to see forms. Obviously, we know what forms are. Forms are what we're looking at. We look at the computer screen. We see square. We see all kinds of shapes and colors and textures and depth and all these things. That's forms. Everything that we see with our eyes is form. So eye consciousness. What is eye consciousness? In Buddhism, there's no such thing as one consciousness. There's no such thing as this is my consciousness. There are consciousness for each of the six sense organs. So this eye consciousness is the faculty that is allowing us to be aware that we have this eye and that we are able to see these forms. So that's what eye consciousness is. And eye contact. Now what's contact? Contact is when the eye sees the forms and the eye consciousness is aware of that. So contact is you're looking out and you see, I see a square or rectangular computer screen. That's contact. I see a teacup. I see deer in my virtual left. That's contact. So everybody clear so far? Any questions? Anybody still not able to hear me very well? That's a good question. It's a very good question. And I think it might um, be cleared up by a little sutta we're going to read after. Um, if you aren't aware of it, is it still contact? It's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest, is there a sound? um, I don't know if I can answer that specifically 100%. I guess my best guess to that answer, um, before we read the sutta afterwards, that I want us to read, is that I guess no, it wouldn't be contact. It would just be forms that would be there. It's not saying that the forms don't exist. It's just saying that there is no consciousness within our psychophysical organism that is making contact with those forms. So, let's see. Eye contact is on fire, and whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Now, this sensation, when we talk about feeling in Buddhism, that is the definition of feeling. When you hear the word feeling in Buddhism, we're not talking about like, oh, I feel depressed, I feel happy, like the emotions, these kind of things. We're not that. When you hear feeling, what you're thinking about is raw physical feeling with the body and the mind of pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or neutral feeling. So, whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which originates in dependence on eye contact. So, once we have this contact, that's when the feeling comes. We have the feeling of we see something we like, a beautiful woman if you're a guy, or whatever, or a beautiful man, whatever is makes this contact, and we say, "Ooh, I like it." We have all these things that come up, these feelings of like, dislike, all of this. This is what uh, we're talking about, dependent on eye contact. If there was no contact with this object, then we wouldn't have feeling about it. But because there is contact, there is feeling. And that's actually part of dependent origination, which we will probably do next time we do a sutta. Um, without contact, there can be no feeling. So, and again, you guys can ask questions anytime. I'll do my best to answer them. This whole thing can be a little confusing, especially um, if you're not familiar with the words and the verbiage and how things are, um, what things actually mean with regards to the actual teachings, as opposed to what the common English understanding of the word would be. So, whatever sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which originates in dependence on eye contact, that is also on fire. And so we're thinking, okay, so everything's on fire. Well, why? What is it? What is this fire? And then it says, and with what are these on fire? With the fire of passion, I say, the fire of hatred, the fire of delusion. So passion, hatred, and delusion. Passion is roga. And what this passion is a clinging, a strong desire, wanting, grasping, craving. That's this passion. We have real passion for these things that we like, and we want to experience them over and over again. What is uh, fire of hatred? That's a little bit more understanding, right? Hatred, dosa. This is aversion. We don't like it. Whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we smell, taste, all of these things, we make contact with things, we don't like it. We have a strong aversion to that. We want to run away from it. We don't want to have anything to do with it. We want to avoid it if at all possible. So this is that fire of hatred and the fire of delusion. Delusion in Buddhism, when we hear delusion, what we're talking about is not seeing things as they truly are. Not understanding the Four Noble Truths, not seeing reality as it truly is, taking yourself to be a true reality, taking these things that occur to be self, personalizing them. All of these things fall under delusion. So all of this eye contact, eye consciousness forms, all of this falls under our habitual tendencies to attach, to be averse, and to be deluded to the true nature of reality. And indeed, we actually have this tendency to attach and to be averse because of our delusion. If we did not have this delusion, if we saw things clearly, then we wouldn't have this fire of attachment and aversion. So, with fire, the fire of hatred, the fire of delusion, with birth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, they are on fire. And because we have this delusion, because we have these habitual tendencies to cling and to run away from things that we don't like, it's the I don't like mind. Because we have those habitual tendencies and the delusion that is the core of this, we are subject to being born again. And because we're subject to being born, if you're born, you have to grow old. You have to grow sick. You have to die. If you're born, you will experience sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That is the nature of being born. So, all of this is on fire. And again, this is just going to be going through the six senses. The ear, bhikkhus, is on fire. Sounds are on fire. Ear consciousness is on fire. Ear contact is on fire. And again, this is the same as seeing. Sound comes. We have an ear, we have a consciousness, and the meaning of those three is contact. We hear something. I don't know, loud heavy metal music. Some of us might be like, oh, I like that. And some of us might scream in pain and try to run away or stick our heads under a bunch of pillows to try to avoid the feeling of this loud music. So, whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which originates in dependence on ear contact, that also is on fire. And with what are these on fire? With the fire of passion. I say, the fire of hatred, the fire of delusion. With birth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, they are on fire. The nose, bhikkhus, is on fire. Smells are on fire. Nose consciousness is on fire. Nose contact is on fire. And whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which originates in dependence on nose contact, that also is on fire. And with what are these on fire? With the fire of passion, the fire of hatred, the fire of delusion, with birth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, they are on fire. And you notice the Buddha is not saying that they are, in their very nature, is on fire. Eye, ear, nose is just eye, ear, nose. Forms, sounds, and smells are just forms, sounds, and smells. Eye consciousness, nose consciousness, ear consciousness. These are just what they are. But they're on fire because of our habitual tendencies, because what we do with them. That's why they're on fire. The craving that arises, the craving to like, the craving to dislike. This is what the Buddha is trying to say here. That we, because of our habitual tendencies and because of our craving, we cause ourselves our own problems. Okay, so the tongue, bhikkhus, is on fire. Tastes are on fire. Tongue consciousness is on fire. Tongue contact is on fire. And whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which originates in dependence on tongue contact, that also is on fire. And with what are these on fire? Our old friends. The fire of passion, the fire of hatred, the fire of delusion. With birth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, they are on fire. The body is on fire. Touch is on fire. Body consciousness is on fire. And so we know this, so I'm not going to go through every single repetition here. We are kind of understand what's going on. Now, the mind is on fire. The mind. So when in our day-to-day wordage in the West, when we think of the senses, what do we think? Eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. 5 senses. Okay? If there's a 6th sense, then it's like you can see dead people, or you can have extrasensory perception, or all these kind of things. That's what a 6th sense is in the English verbiage. But in Buddhism, the 6th sense is mind. Mind is one of the 6 senses. They don't talk about 5 senses in Buddhism. We talk about 6. So mind is that 6th sense. So mind is on fire. Mental objects are on fire. And what are these mental objects? They can be a variety of different things. But the most common mental object is just simply thought. Thoughts that arise. Right? We smell something, we hear something. We have the contact with that. We have the initial feeling of I like or I dislike. And from that I like, I dislike comes the mental objects. I like because these are the reasons I like. These are the reasons I don't like. It's because of this. This is the fault. This is at fault. This person, this thing is at fault for why I don't like, or why I have to deal with this thing that I don't like. So this is the mental objects that come into the mind. Mental objects are on fire. Mind consciousness is on fire. Mind contact is on fire. And whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which originates in dependence on mind contact, that also is on fire. And with what are these on fire? We already know. Fire of passion, the fire of hatred, the fire of delusion. With birth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, they are on fire. So we've gone through the 6 senses. And then the Buddha continues. Perceiving this, the learned and noble disciple becomes disenchanted with the eye, with forms, with eye consciousness, with eye contact, and whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, which originates in dependence on eye contact. So the Buddha is saying, when you see the suffering that you cause yourself by following these habitual tendencies of the I like and the I dislike craving, and how that leads to anxiety, to our suffering, and that leads to unskillful decisions, which causes us even more suffering, and it's just this big cycle of making our lives something that we don't need to make them, making our lives full of stress, anxiety, and suffering. We have the choice to not do that, to let go. And so we hear the Buddha is saying they become disenchanted. I used to be really into that, but I'm not so much anymore. And when you hear about monks, right, or like you think about people who become celibate or people who renounce things, and you think, well, wow, like I can't do that. I could never do that. I can't believe they do that. Well, it's easy if you've developed enough disenchantment. That's the key, right? It's like the Buddha gives an example of sand castles. The Buddha says when children have lots of passion and lots of attachment, and they love to make sand castles, and they'll continue to make sand castles. But if they had no passion for it, or when the passion is done, when the toy is no longer interesting, then they destroy it or they just leave it there. And as Jimi Hendrix said, castles made of sand fall in the sea eventually. So it's about disenchantment. You're no longer feeling attached to these things because you see the downside to it. I don't need to put myself into this situation. And so he goes through the same thing. He becomes disenchanted with the ear and sound, with the nose and smells, with the tongue and tastes, with the body and touch, with the mind and mental objects. And then at the end, and through this disenchantment, the noble disciple is one who practices, who's a serious practitioner, and whose goal is, for awakening. So the noble disciple becomes dispassionate. So it starts out with the feelings of disenchantment. I'm not so thrilled about this anymore. And when that happens, you lose passion. It's like, I don't want to do this. I don't need to do this anymore. And when there's an absence of passion, you're free. And when free, aware of that freedom, aware that rebirth is exhausted, that the holy life has been lived, and that what was to be done has been done, that there is nothing more to do in this body-mind existence. And the end of the sutta is, while this exposition was being delivered, the minds of the 1,000 bhikkhus without attachment became free from defilements, i.e., they became awakened ones, they became enlightened. So, in this sutta, what the Buddha is aiming at is showing us the core, where it comes from, where how we interact with existence is through our senses. And I want to go through another quick sutta that's going to explain. And this sutta is called The All. And Let me. Oh, I shut down my browser. Okay, the all. Bhikkhus, I will teach you the all. Listen to that. And what is the all? The eye and forms, the ear and sounds, the nose and odors, the tongue and tastes, the body and tactile objects, the mind and mental objects. This is called the all. If anyone should speak thus, having rejected this all, I shall make known another all, that would be merely an empty boast. As in, there is nothing else. We cannot know anything beyond our six senses. The six senses are the all. How we experience subjective reality is through these six senses. This is how important the understanding of the six senses is to our Buddhist practice. And part of when we have our mindfulness practice, when we're observing ourselves, when we're observing ourselves in meditation, we're observing our senses. We're observing feeling, what comes up. We have pains in our body. We have um, feelings of hunger. We hear sounds. How do we react to sounds when we're trying to meditate? We want everything to be totally quiet. We want nothing to bother us. And then a sound comes. And that's the contact, right? We hear the sound, we have contact, and from that sound, that's when anger happens. Dang it, I'm trying to be quiet. Why is this person doing that? Or why does this have to happen while I'm trying to have quiet meditation? The sound is not bothering anybody. The sound is just a sound. But we add to that sound with all our habitual tendencies and our mental proliferation. Okay? If we were able to let go of that, we would be free. If there's a sound, okay, it's just a sound. It might cause a painful feeling if it's really loud, but I don't need to go off the hinges. I don't need to be angry about that, because being angry and developing this aversion will just cause me to do unskillful things and will cause me to create my own suffering. When instead I can just let go and be at peace. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any confusion? Okay, that's always good. Does anybody have any, if you're like possibly new to Buddhism or anything like that, any basic questions about Buddhism in general? Since we seem to have gone through the topic and there's no major questions, we could move it to a more open forum of discussing anything related to meditation or Buddhism. Okay then, I guess we can call it a night. Thank you all for coming and listening to the Dhamma. I hope that I was able to explain it in a decent way that was not too off-putting or making you want to run to the hills. Sometimes this can be quite confusing and sometimes quite dry, and obviously, as you can see, repetitive. Um, but the importance of it in actual Buddhist practices cannot be understated, for sure.